How we doing, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. I am your host, Richie, wishing everyone a very happy Friday. And I'll tell you where people are very happy today on a Friday. I'm talking about over in Cleveland. The Cleveland Browns, regardless of team affiliation and who you root for, definitely just an inspirational scene yesterday, defeating the New York Jets 37-20, solidifying only their second playoff berth in over 2 decades, the other one most recently being 2020. Prior to that, you have to go all the way back to when they were coached by Bill Belichick, going against his teacher, Bill Parcells, when Parcells coached the Patriots. So it's been a very long time. And today's show is specifically about my reaction to yesterday's game, as well as the reascension of Joe Flacco, who was essentially semi-retired and had ties to the Jets, as well as division rival Baltimore Ravens, who happen to be the best team in the league right now. Just an amazing scene. When you think about the Cleveland Browns, these are fans that, while they were a powerhouse pre-merger, never have seen their team win a Super Bowl. The loyalty that those fans have, the atmosphere that they play as making it a very tough place to play on the road for visitors, and the fact that that owner Art Modell moved them out of Cleveland to Baltimore. The city preserved the name and the historic value of them. They come back as an expansion team a few years later, start from the ground up, because the Ravens essentially started with Browns players. So they weren't the typical expansion team in that regard because they moved. You know, it's not the same thing as a Carolina, nor a Jacksonville or a Houston Texans. But Joe Flacco, former Super Bowl MVP over a decade ago. This is a guy that prior to joining the Browns, his record was 3-17 in starts, which essentially says, hey, the guy's cooked. The guy doesn't have it anymore. You know, time to hang it up. What I found interesting is that Al Michaels on yesterday's telecast actually said that, speaking of Flacco, he was very close to hanging it up. And, you know, whenever you're a free agent quarterback, but you have value because of a resume that you built over years, and maybe the league views you as a backup or as a stopgap or as a mentor, you know, you kind of just wait patiently for that phone to ring. And this has every bit of just a Cinderella story. I mean, you're talking about, in terms of age value and what he's been accomplishing lately, the only quarterback older that's been doing this kind of stuff is Tom Brady, who's very recently retired. I'm going to hit you with this banner here just to kind of go over yesterday's game. As I already alluded to, the Browns make only their second postseason in the past 20-plus decades, previously with Baker Mayfield, who's currently with the Tampa Bay Bucks. 37-20. I think one of the most intriguing things about this game, and I got to admit, I could punch myself in the face for benching Joe Flacco in 2 different work leagues. Most of the fantasy experts were giving advice to bench Flacco in this game because just a week removed from the Amari Cooper historical game, Amari Cooper did not suit up for yesterday's game. And, you know, you're talking about everything that was pitched as a defensive struggle. You know, the New York Jets have had their share at the quarterback position with the injury to Aaron Rodgers, but I don't think anybody in their right mind thought that we were going to see the offensive explosion we had yesterday. You know, what made it impressive to me is that Flacco was able to just find everybody in space. It almost seems like the game is too slow for him right now. I don't necessarily know if some time away from the game just maybe reinvigorated something in him that we haven't seen in a few years. But to play at this high of a level at this age, and with essentially just being a backup for the past few years, and this year not even getting called, I mean, it took extreme circumstances for this guy to be the quarterback of the Browns. It took injuries to so many different quarterbacks, starting with Deshaun Watson. You know, Jacoby Brissett was there. It's just been a plethora of guys getting an opportunity and getting injured. Not to mention, you lose your superstar Nick Chubb earlier the year in Pittsburgh, your superstar running back. Your offensive line is depleted. This team has every bit of Cinderella written all over them. I'm going to give you a couple of facts about last night's game as well here as I keep my bigger ticker going. This team scored the most points in their franchise history since 1954, pre-merger title game. 34 at the half. They would have tied it if the recently signed Riley Patterson did not miss a point after attempt. Dustin Hopkins is their regular kicker, who is currently injured with a hamstring. David Njoku. This is a guy that I think most people believe has always had a ton of talent. You know, I could speak on it from my fantasy team for Pops Cheddar in the Sun League. I picked this dude up off the waiver wire. And in past seasons, he's a guy that I would maybe pick up for a week when you're missing somebody. But he is literally entering the conversation of superstar tight end now. And it wasn't the big money contract of a Deshaun Watson that unveiled this prize. It wasn't any quarterback, including Baker Mayfield, prior to Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco and this dude have an incredibly good chemistry. And when you see Njoku play right now, you can literally make an argument that he's playing just as well, if not better, than name your best tight end that's a staple in this league doing it at a superstar level. It's incredible. It truly is. And I'm going to hit you with some reasons why I think this Browns team literally can be the wild card that nobody wants to run into. It was chronicled before the game, and Amazon did a pretty good job of getting after it. But this Browns secondary really is that damn good. When you consider that this is a pass-first, pass-happy, pass-always league, the metrics and the way that they are limiting drives into more three-point field goal attempts as opposed to ending in touchdowns cannot be ignored. I do believe that yesterday in open space, probably more so in the first half, the Browns might have been a little lackadaisical back there. They definitely tightened that up. I mentioned this. They're not missing a beat in the running game. Nick Chubb is a top 5-6 back in this league. What they're doing without him, and you're down to like your third, fourth, and fifth offensive line guys, just recycling guys. That's why I don't want to hear shit about people saying they can't win with backup linemen. But Kevin Stefanski has to be the coach of the year. What up, Zach? Yeah, kicking it at the house today, man. I'm exhausted, bro. Wasn't feeling too hot today. But I'll be back next week. Next year, I should say. Thank you for watching, Zach, as always. Just thank you for always being an awesome supporter of the show, bro. We got to get you on here soon, man. Talk about your Chargers a little. Important offseason coming up for you guys. I mentioned this. Joe Flacco is the first quarterback to finally get the most out of tight end David Njoku. And, you know, it begs to question, in the offseason, is this even a quarterback controversy? I mean, it's got to be kind of hard when you consider that they literally reset the market for Deshaun Watson, which a lot of people scoffed at because I think it was a terrible move just based on the clear unknown. This is a guy that was dealing with a lot of legal issues off the field. He didn't play for the better part of 2 years. And when you look at the Browns' history of drafting always the wrong quarterback, I understand the desperation of it, but it truly led to a lot of problems elsewhere around the league when evaluating who's worth what. Lamar Jackson, who's a former league MVP and currently the quarterback of the best team in professional football, had to beg, plead for a deal. He finally got a deal that he felt was worth it. But Deshaun Watson really messed up the market, or, you know, his representatives and the Browns actually giving him that deal. And right now, I don't think any Cleveland Brown fan is going to tell you that even if Deshaun Watson was healthy, that they would want him in there as opposed to Joe Flacco. It's all good, Zach. Temporary, bro. Your Chargers have a lot of talent. If they bring in Coach Harbaugh, I think they're going to be okay. I really do. And you know, a lot of times environment and roster and philosophy has a lot to do with people's success. But Joe Flacco is literally the perfect fit for this team, and they are the perfect fit for him. This is a team that craved veteran leadership. And while Deshaun Watson is a superstar in this league, or at least he was before his legal issues, I don't necessarily believe that he brought a calmness and a maturity in this locker room that they needed. I actually think that the time being hurt and actually having Joe Flacco in the building is actually going to be beneficial for Deshaun, because I think there's a lot to be learned there. And it's pretty remarkable because when you think about the team that they beat, it's kind of poetic in a lot of ways. Aaron Rodgers was the big prize of the offseason. The New York Jets made a deal with the Green Bay Packers. He unfortunately tore his Achilles. He's actually the only player in NFL history to have a season-ending injury at that position and only throw one pass. I don't know who the hell finds these metrics or how you even know that that's a stat, but it was a stat. And I found that out yesterday just looking at the game. But I guess what I'm saying is when you see Rodgers embracing Flacco after the game, HBO was all over the Jets this year, Hard Knocks, you would have naturally assumed that this would be the Jets with the coronation this juncture of the year, considering that all the free agents wanted to align and come together there, because we've seen it happen in previous years with the Rams as well as the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I'm not saying the Jets are cooked, but next year is their second act that they got to try to make it work with Rodgers. But Joe Flacco was on his couch 6 weeks ago, guys. He's a father of 5 children, super semi-retired. And to come back and do what he's doing, it's impossible not to root for this guy. It really is. And I had already mentioned this, and I would love to hear your thoughts, the viewers, as to what should happen. I already alluded to, they reset the market with the signing of Deshaun. Can they or will they move on? I'll say this. Similar to what the Cleveland Browns are going through right now, the Philadelphia Eagles went through something similarly when Nick Foles, who was essentially a career backup, came in for an injured Carson Wentz, won a Super Bowl against the greatest dynasty of any and all time in the NFL in terms of a 20-year period, that being the New England Patriots. They won a shootout against the great Tom Brady. They allowed Nick Foles to move on and sign a contract elsewhere. Not that very year. It was actually the next year because Wentz was hurt the next year again. And as defending champions, Philly fell the next season. But the point I'm making is they knew where their money was tied. At the time, they knew where their future was, or at least what they felt their future was. And they did eventually let him go. The New York Giants did it with Jeff Hostetler. You know, we've seen it happen with backup quarterbacks that arrive in a game and then move on. In this case, let's say hypothetically if they win the Super Bowl, I don't see a scenario where Joe Flacco would not retire, because how could you top what he would be able to accomplish right now? Possibly he's interested in hanging around as a mentor to Watson, because he certainly seems happy in Cleveland. And it's got to be rough for the Jets, given that Rodgers got hurt. Simeon's doing okay. Wilson's been an utter shit show. Boyle, forget it. Terrible. But the point is like, this is a team that had the first crack at Joe Flacco. He was a member of their team last year. He was waiting for the phone to ring. Then it never did. And this has been a historical year of quarterbacks getting hurt. Kirk Cousins, Daniel Jones, Justin Herbert, Deshaun Watson. Just so many guys around the league that have been injured. And to think that a former Super Bowl MVP, it took that long, Cleveland lucked out. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that Cleveland honed in on him, because they went through a ton of quarterbacks before they fell on this good fortune of luck. Although fantasy experts know I'm pissed, because if I do lose my work league, either one of them, I am blaming it solely on not starting Joe Flacco. No Amari Cooper, nobody saw this coming. Jets have a very good defense. I also want to hit on another quarterback and get you, the viewers' thoughts on this. It's been not much of a secret that I'm not a big fan of Sean Payton in terms of a character. I think Never been a high character guy in my eyes. Great coach, or at least a pretty good one. From time to time, I do think he could be slightly overrated. But I do want to give you a little bit of my thoughts about what occurred and what is occurring right now in Denver. Russell Wilson versus Sean Payton. It's disturbing on a level because I know that a lot of times you get players being called out about not being loyal to an organization. Even if they, look at Saquon Barkley in New York. He's done everything the organization has asked him when he plays. Granted, he does have an injury history. He has not gotten paid. He might this year finally. Just one player, one example. Lamar Jackson, I alluded to it, former league MVP. This situation that's going on right now, yeah, me and Zach are like-minded. This situation that's going on right now is it's disturbing because this is an organization that when Russell Wilson became available gave up all kinds of draft capital. They also gave up all kinds of draft capital to get their coach, Sean Payton. What is Sean Payton's claim to fame? Started with the New York Giants. He was an offensive coach. He ended up linking up with Bill Parcells in Dallas before he got the head coaching gig with the New Orleans Saints. New Orleans' lone Super Bowl victory and their only appearance came with Sean Payton at the helm, but it will always be a little tainted and a little tampered with because of the Bounty Gate situation. So from a character-based standpoint, if that is all you've had, I think it's a little more egregious than Bill Belichick when people want to talk about Spygate and Deflategate and whatever other gate they want to create, because this is the one and only one that Sean Payton won. At any rate, he was a member of the Fox studio for a while. He comes in, he gets the gig. Year one was a tough one for Russell Wilson. He's a fringe Hall of Famer, I guess you could say. Won the NFC twice, won one Super Bowl. Should have won 2 Super Bowls were it not for the worst call in Super Bowl history. You give it to beast mode, we know the story. Year one in Denver, very difficult. This particular year, he has a better statistical value on a lot of metrics than perennial MVP candidate Patrick Mahomes. Him getting benched right now is not about performance. It's about the Broncos finding a way out of the financial situation that they are in with this guy. We've seen something similar happen in the past with Carr and the Raiders, very unceremoniously being dumped. He's now currently the quarterback of the Saints, and he better come through for me because I chose him over Flacco. I might regret that in that work league. But I guess what I'm trying to get at and bring it back to the point is that I will never get mad at any of these players getting theirs, no matter what the public thinks. Because when you can get thrown away like a bad habit, when you're having the kind of year that Russell Wilson's having, it's ugly. And I believe that Sean Payton is a bit of a hypocrite because Russell Wilson has done absolutely everything this man has asked of him. And at some point, when is Sean Payton going to be accountable for some of this? Denver has a pretty good roster. When I see people on social media saying that they don't have a good roster or they don't have good receivers, I'm like, dude, I'd trade them for the guys that KC has. I'd definitely trade them for the guys that the Giants have. So I don't necessarily believe that it's a matter of talent. This is a good football team. They're topsy-turvy, they're up and down, but they're certainly not a bad team. And in the end, ultimately, I think Denver's going to realize that the real mistake they made was hiring Sean Payton. I believe that he's a guy that too often gets mixed in with better coaches like the Bill Belichick's, the Bill Parcells's, the Tom Coughlin's of the world, those kind of guys. Sean Payton won a lot of games in this league. But if you look at his time in New Orleans, having a Hall of Fame quarterback in the form of Drew Brees and some very good defenses for some of that run, not all of it, but some of it, I do believe that only winning 1 Super Bowl is a bit of an underachievement. I really believe that. I don't think Sean Payton's as good as everybody else does. I think Denver might find out the hard way. Where does Russ end up next year? Shut up, Giant fans. He's too expensive. Doesn't make sense. Not a stopgap. No. But I have a hunch that he might actually end up where he started, the Seattle Seahawks. They are not exactly in a quarterback healthy place right now. Geno Smith, Drew Lock, Idris Salam, my co-host, will say it the same way. They are essentially the same player. I believe that Russell Wilson might end up back in Seattle. It'll be his swan song. And they'll probably draft a quarterback too and have Russ mentor the person. But I believe that's where Russell Wilson ends up. I'm saying to myself, just combing through my head, where else does he make sense? There's a couple of places that could make sense. The Raiders don't exactly have it figured out at quarterback. But once again, that is another football team that I believe will draft a quarterback. Get at me in the comments, guys. Let me know what you think about some of this. Where does Russell Wilson go? Where does he belong? And in my closing thought, I would like to once again just congratulate not only the Cleveland Browns players, but the Cleveland Browns fans. You know, I could relate to being a fanatic of a football team or a basketball team or whatever have you. But when I think about the long suffering that this Cleveland Browns organization has gone through, it's kind of cool because they went from kind of being an afterthought when Deshaun went down. Mike Zappi, who was a big contributor to the show, other members of this podcast that come on in, would tell you that they've had a championship caliber defense, but their legitimate holdup was the quarterback position. Now, when you fast forward and look at what they have done, now that they got some adequate quarterback play, it's a cool little story. They left Cleveland originally, went to Baltimore, then restarted the Browns organization again. It was heartbreaking on the eye test to just be like, damn, they could do that to my team. It just kind of, it was like a sobering thought, like, damn, this is messed up. Because it's not just any team. Like, this team is iconic. So maybe it does, Zach. Just a thought, but time will tell. No, but when I think about the way they left, the heartbreak, watching the Ravens beat the New York Giants and win a Super Bowl, and then you lose Bill Belichick. Well, they fired him. He goes to New England, has a dynasty over there. I mean, Tom Brady helped a little, but Belichick's a great coach. Now you're here. And to think that their first Super Bowl could go through Baltimore and they could potentially play the Ravens to get to a Super Bowl as a wild card, no less, it's just a phenomenal story about how things come full circle. I don't have a dog in this fight because my New York Giants are dead. In the NFC, unless the Green Bay Packers qualified, out of respect for my father, I always support the Packers if it doesn't affect the Giants. In the AFC, I've always been, I guess you could say, a sympathizer with Buffalo because I've always felt for those fans as well. But the Cleveland Browns, I mean, on so many metrics are the NFL. And I know that the late, great Jim Brown was smiling with pride looking at what the Browns did yesterday. Just getting back to like what they do, just bullying people. If you follow the history of who the Browns used to be, it wasn't always this egregious. Pre-merger, they were the standard in what winning looked like. And, Jim Brown left the game early to do other endeavors, whether it was activism or whether it was acting. Jim Brown, may he rest in peace, was a true icon. But get at me in the comments, guys. And pretty soon, we're going to do some hot takes on MVPs, candidates. I think we more or less, at least I did, solidified who I think the Cinderella team is. Cleveland Browns are a dangerous team, folks. They are not one to sleep on. And they are not a team that's going to be a pushover for anybody in these playoffs. And Joe Flacco, undeniably, has to be the story of the year. I know that it goes without saying that Damar Hamlin almost lost his life on the football field last year. And he should, without a doubt, be comeback player of the year for that reason alone. Just the fact that he's still alive and playing football. It's a grand blessing. It's a beautiful thing. Shout out to the medical team in Cincinnati who helped save his life a year ago. But if were it not for that extraordinary circumstance, Joe Flacco would be your comeback player of the year. At minimum, I think he should be on the ballot. And knowing the kind of character Joe Flacco is, he'll be on his feet cheering for DeMar. Until next time, I am Richie, and I appreciate you watching. We will be back with part 2, week 17, later today. Announcement to come. Have a great day, everyone. And it's almost the new year, man. Take care.